Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It is Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. I'm Andrew Hansen, joined by the one and only Shane Caldwell. And Shane, I know you had a fun weekend of relaxation. You look terrific. You look like you're rejuvenated. Got a little sun. How you feeling? Nice weekend.
Yeah, I feel good. I got to get out on the water there. I probably got a little bit burnt. I haven't had a lot of sun exposure this year, but yeah, I'm excited to get back to some of the NBA action here. Really exciting games yesterday, and I see OKC forced a game 7. So we got our first game 7 on this slate, and then that means we'll have another game 7 coming up with Houston and OKC. So we got some good action in the bubble here, and we certainly have some breakout superstars that we're going to talk about, and then we got a good old kind of grinded out defensive battle. Two really good teams in the East here with Boston and Toronto. So yeah, I'm excited to break this slate down. It's looking like a really good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're coming back at a good time. We had a really good night again for DFS Coach Talk. The GPP on FanDuel for NBA was a nice, easy cash. We faded Giannis and Harden in that lineup. And then on DraftKings, we had a really strong coach's clipboard again. We didn't even put Giannis in the clipboard. And that was the real key. We focused on Butler and Dragic, Bam, Middleton, and those guys really went off. I built a lineup straight from the coach's clipboard that came in 53rd in the big tournament, the $20 tournament. So that placed for 200. Better than a 1% lineup. It was just tiny bit off from taking it down. So no, extreme takedowns. I know Coach had a first place on fantasy draft for 500. But no extreme takedowns, but really solid wins across the board. Our Major League Baseball lineup cashed. So good night for DFS Coach Talk. And do want to mention the NBA news of the passing of Coach John Thompson. He was a favorite as a kid with the Georgetown crew. And then I had the pleasure of playing for his son on the Princeton JV team, John Thompson III. And I never got to meet his father, but I really loved playing for his son. Great guy, high character, and sad day for the basketball world. It was great on TNT how the guys had the white towels over their shoulders, in the studio. So, just wanted to mention that big news. But on a more positive note, like I said, big winning night for the DFS Coach Talk family, and we're going to try to get back after it again. And Shane and I we've made a pact here because yesterday Coach and I had a 50-minute show for the 2-game slate, and we've decided we'll go a little bit crisper here. I think it paid off. We were really trying to grind through the tough pricing on the 2-game slate with all those studs, and I think it worked out. We dig in here, 16, 18 hours ahead of lock to try to sort through how we're going to break this down. And, the sites have done a pretty good job of doing some challenging pricing. So Shane and I are going to do that again, and we'll see if we can get it out a little bit quicker here for you tonight. So 2-game slate, as you mentioned, Shane, want to thank our presenting sponsors here, mybookie.ag. We have a terrific offer from them. Go to our website and check that out and use the promo code Coach Talk. It involves a 100% match and a free play, so we highly encourage that. And then tvg.com, $300 risk-free bet. Can't beat it. Go to our website, dfscoachtalk.com, and check that out. We got the Kentucky Derby coming up, so this is a perfect time to take advantage of that offer. So we thank those sponsors. And mybookie.ag has the lines here, so let's look at the first game. It is Boston against Toronto, 5:30 Eastern tip. This is game 2 of the series. Boston won the first one, 112-94. And this one is set for a 217.5 total. Toronto favored by 1.5. No big injury news to speak of, Shane. Talking a little bit here before the podcast, obviously a disappointing performance for Toronto in game 1. Are you feeling a bounce back from any of their guys in game 2?
Yeah, I think Toronto is one of the best teams in the league still, and they had a really shooting night in game one. I know Boston has been kind of their kryptonite, and they've played really bad. Boston's had their number all year, including in game one. But I don't think that it's gonna play out like that again. I don't think Boston's just gonna be able to blow them out of the gym again. And Vegas obviously doesn't think so either, because we're looking at a really tight, really close one. Toronto's like 1.5 point favorites here. So yeah, you got to like some of these Toronto players to bounce back. We were talking before the podcast. I mean, when I look at this, it's really a small sample size, that one game in this playoff series. They're playing at a much faster pace in terms of possessions compared to the other game that's more of a half court game. So even though these teams aren't really super fast teams compared to the other game, Denver, Utah, this is a faster paced game. The problem is these are two of the best defensive efficiency teams in the entire league, and definitely two of the best left. They're just really good top to bottom, especially with Boston. They've been starting Marcus Smart, who's getting a lot of minutes. He's a defensive stopper, and they already have a lot of defensive guys. So that's what you're looking at here, is a little bit faster pace compared to the other game on the slate, but really good defensive teams. But you have a lot of good offensive efficiency players in this game as well. So, I mean, you're really, the difficult thing about this slate is everyone kind of is looking at the same players. So you got to try to differentiate, pick the right value players, and get the right roster construction. Because, I mean, with Boston, you could really make a case for just about any of their starters. You can start with, Kemba Walker's kind of that, mid-high price guy at 7,800 on FanDuel. Jaylen Brown is still pretty capable play, and he's a lot cheaper on FanDuel. Jaylen Brown, 6,300 on FanDuel compared to 7,300 on DK. That's a pretty big discrepancy there. Marcus Smart, he had a pretty good game last game in terms of shooting. He is a streaky shooter. I wouldn't expect him to have that much scoring in this game, but he really does a lot of other things, and rebounds and assists and defensive stats. So he's 5,700 on FanDuel. And of course, Jason Tatum is $9,000 to $9,200 range. It's a little bit hard for him to pay off the value lately, but he is capable of a high ceiling game of upwards of 50 plus fantasy points at any time, 50 or 60. So you can't really forget about him. And then I know Daniel Tice had a really good game last game. What did he have? I think 15 rebounds.
Yeah,
and he's in that $5,000 range. So yeah, so he's solid. I don't know if he's going to have that type of performance again, though. That was a kind of a breakout performance for him. Maybe he does, but I'm not sure if I'm that confident in him breaking out. So I can see a lot of people going to him. And then on the Toronto side, again, I'm pretty much looking at most of their starters. I mean, at least as in consideration here, Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, and Pascal Siakam. Look for those guys to have bounce backs. And I do like Norman Powell. Maybe he'll get a little bit more run off the bench to get a little bit more scoring for them because they really struggled. So I think Norman Powell will have a bounce back game, and Serge Ibaka has been very productive in that $6,000 range on FanDuel and DraftKings. He's been very productive when he's in there, and I feel like they're going to play a little bit more small ball and not let Gasol play as much. We were talking before the podcast because Gasol had he isn't really playing that good, but he had 25 minutes compared to his normal like low 20. So they let him play a little more, but I could see Ibaka getting more run off the bench and coming back. A bounce back from VanVleet. He shot really bad from three-pointer, but he's still a really great three-point shooter. So I think Toronto's just going to shoot better and score more and keep this a close game. And I think that this is going to be a close game. It's a little bit faster pace, even though the defenses are better. I like this game. And the late game, I think, is going to be highly owned, but there's some good plays in this game. So that's kind of where I'm at so far with this one.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's weird to think of Boston and Toronto as a faster paced game than much else, because they are so good defensively. You're just not expecting a high scoring game, but they are faster paced compared to Utah and Denver. So I agree with you. I think it makes sense to get some decent exposure to this game and not just load up on the last game. It is a game 7. We figure it's going to be, even harder fought. Maybe people will get a little bit tight and they won't be quite as efficient because they've been shooting the lights out. So I agree with you. I think that's important. I think that may be a little bit different than most folks. The natural inclination is just to overlook this game and really focus heavily on game 2. So let's continue to dig in here on game 1. On the Celtics side, we talked about no real injury news. Of course, Hayward continues to be out, and that's why, as you mentioned, Marcus Smart in the starting lineup. So, it does shift the usage for Boston, and they are using a pretty short rotation, basically an 8-man rotation. So a lot of minutes available if you can pick out the right guys. You mentioned Kemba first, and that's the first place I'm going to look as the leader there. Has those extra ball handling responsibilities without Hayward. Smart did play great in the last game, but like you said, was it 5 for 9 on threes? You can't expect that again. So not quite sure if I'll use him again. It's a tough decision. He's right in the middle price-wise of Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson. So that'll be a key decision for us to make. Jaylen Brown, he's so much more affordable than Tatum. And I tried to get him in my first lineup on DraftKings, but he doesn't quite fit. And I think that the pricing is tough on both sites again. When I built my initial lineup on both sites, it didn't fit by a couple $100. And it's not like I was just trying to jam all the studs in there and at the end say, I can't fit it. I was trying to mix in some value plays as I went. But, they've just done a great job here these last few slates of making it tough. So we're really going to have to battle for some value. Tice is certainly in play here for the Celtics. And then Robert Williams III, he made headlines with getting those big minutes off the bench instead of Cantor. So he's a cheap option you can look at for 3.3. He went 5 for 5 from the field. Maybe he won't do that again, but he is primarily just going to shoot layups and dunks, and he can get you those blocks and the hustle rebounds. So he's certainly in consideration for me. Brad Wanamaker is another cheap guy you could look at on DraftKings. I don't think I'd play him on FanDuel, but we need somebody in the 3K range on DraftKings. So Robert Williams III, Brad Wanamaker are two of the options. There's somebody in the second game I like a little bit better, but just wanted to mention those guys. And then with Toronto, like you said, just poor shooting. Fred VanVleet went 3 for 16. He still managed to get 40.5 fantasy points, though. I feel a little bit better about him than Lowry. He's been pretty strong lately, and I do think he'll shoot better than that. Powell, like you said, we got to figure he'll play better. He shot poorly, didn't do anything else, got in foul trouble. I mean, basically, there's no way he can play worse than he did in game one. Ibaka, he has really been efficient with his play when he's out there, but tough price. On FanDuel, it's really tempting, because you have to play 2 power forwards. So I know he's going to be in consideration for me to the very end. And then interesting that you can use Tice over there as a power forward. Coach used him on the last slate, and that was huge. But I think the last thing you said about this game was you think it'll be a closer battle. And if it is, we're going to get these guys playing down the stretch. And they didn't in the first game. It was, 20 points for a while there. And it just turned into a dud. So I hope it's a closer game, not only for the entertainment factor, but so we can get these guys to play bigger minutes and more meaningful minutes. And if we get that close game and we have more exposure to this game than others, that should give us an edge.
Summer is here, and sports are finally back, which can only mean one thing. It's time to get back, relax, and make some cash. Everyone has to start somewhere, which is why you want to get off on the right foot by choosing an established book like MyBookie.ag. With all the major sports seasons just around the corner, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Dynamic betting lines and a simple-to-use platform make the process easier than it's ever been. Create your account in just a few easy steps. Deposit and begin placing your bets. Sign up now using promo code Coach Talk to get your deposit matched 100% all the way up to $1,000. plus an extra $25 free play. That's promo code Coach Talk. Use it to score yourself an extra piece of the pie. With MyBookie, you bet, you win, and most importantly, when you win, you get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting when you were talking about the DraftKings and FanDuel being tight, and the FanDuel pricing is fairly tight, probably not as tight as DraftKings where they're really tight, right? Because that's why you're searching for those lower price guys. But on DraftKings, you have more position flexibility when you do the roster. The problem with the 2-game slate on FanDuel is you don't have as much position flexibility, so you see a lot of similar like lineups. So you really have to get creative and figure out a good roster construction to differentiate yourself. But you only have so many options at center, for example, or point guard. So that's the difficult thing. So you really have to dig in and figure out which guys are going to break out that are maybe a little bit unexpected, and which guys are you going to fade that you think are going to be highly owned here. And, you know, when we're talking about this game versus the second game and where we think the ownership is going to be, that's going to play into those factors of which players we might go if we're deciding between, let's say, a mid-range value guy in the first game versus second game. So I think that the second game we're going to talk about, there is a little bit of regression there. And I think there's going to be positive regression in the Boston-Toronto game because I don't think it's going to blow out again. And you're going to see some bounce backs from some of these players that disappointed a little bit last game. Fred VanVleet, that was a freaky game because he missed all those shots, but he had 6 steals, which is weird. I don't think we're going to get 6 steals again from him, but I expect him to score a lot more. He's going to have to. So it's just interesting dynamics going on there.
Yeah, it really is. So before we get to game 2, if you're new to the program, just want to give you a sense of what we do for our members. We invite you to check us out. We have weekly, monthly, and annual memberships, and we're also running a special that starts today, September 1st. It's called the Fall Special. It's a terrific offer. It's 4 months, big savings on the monthly price. So you get $199 for the entire 4 months from now till the end of the calendar year. And at DFS Coach Talk, all of our memberships are all access. So you get access to all of our sports. So we're doing the NBA slate every day where we give out the cash lineup on FanDuel, the GPP lineup on FanDuel, and then the coach's clipboard on DraftKings with the core players and a bunch of pivots so you can build your lineups. And so we do that every day in basketball. We're giving out multiple lineups every day in baseball. And there's this thing called the NFL, Shane, that's coming up here in not too long. You and I are going to be handling the bulk of the NFL work. And so the Fall Special is great because you get access to all of those sports as well as PGA. And, if you're like I am, Shane, you're fired up here for the NFL right around the corner.
Yeah, I've already had some season-long drafts. I've already been reading all the training camp reports, watching all kinds of press conferences, and we're digging in. And we already did so many team previews in the offseason, so we really understand the rosters and where they're at, new coaching staffs, new players. So we're really following it closely, and we love the NFL. We're super excited. So I know we're talking about the NBA today, but keep in mind this is coming up very quick. We're less than 2 weeks away from the NFL. It's going to come up and sneak up on you really quick because a lot of people were a little skeptical whether they're going to play, but they're definitely playing. It's business as usual for the NFL, just a couple little twists in there. It's going to be a little bit different this year, I think, with everything going on, but I think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great year, and it's exciting.
Absolutely. So great time to join us. Please do grab the Fall Special. You can get that on our website, dfscoachtalk.com. We'll get you into our Discord. And starting here on Tuesday, you can get warmed up with basketball and baseball. We'll do a golf lineup this week, and they'll be ready for football next week. We're going to do lineups every single slate, showdown, main slate. So it's going to be terrific. So thank you for all your support. Game 2, Shane, Utah and Denver. It's game 7, 2 of the best words in sports. And mybookie.ag has Denver as the 1-point favorite in this one, 218 over under. Denver making the comeback. Let's see if they can come back from down 3-1 to finish this one off. What are your thoughts here on game 7?
Well, I mean, compared to the first game, I was talking about how this is a slower paced game. These teams are already fairly slower paced. And in this series, they basically played half court basketball. the issue is the reason why it's still scoring a lot and being high scoring games is they're playing half court basketball with Swiss cheese defense, basically. So they have been, the defense has looked horrible. It just seems like easy shots for players. And, they're trying to start running players at, Mitchell and Murray and running extra players at them, but then they just don't seem to rotate to the other open guys either. So the defense has been pretty bad for these teams, even though you think of them as good teams. But I think that's going to change a little bit in Game 7. So I think the defensive efficiency is going to tighten up a little bit. And I think these teams are due for a little bit of regression in terms of how hot they've been. And there's been games where Utah's been completely on fire. And then there's been games where Denver, especially Jamal Murray, has been just absolutely on fire. So I think they're due a little bit for regression. And I think the game plan is going to change to try to stop Jamal Murray. So I don't know if Jamal Murray is going to have that 60-point, fantasy point game or 50+ real point scoring game. But he's still pretty tough to pass up on. So, Jamal Murray is kind of like where most people are starting their lineups at 9,400 on FanDuel or 9,700 on DK. Even with his price being up, it's kind of hard to pass up on him. But he is an interesting fade in GPPs if you're building multiple lineups, because I think there is a scenario where they figure out a way to shut him down and he doesn't shoot as well from the field, get some turnovers, that type of thing. And it's going to be, again, slower pace, but a little bit. Maybe they decide to play defense this game is my point, right? Maybe they figure out an actual way to stop him, because it didn't seem like they're that interested. He's been amazing, though. I really can't fault the guy at all. It's really hard to talk about even the thought of fading him, but you have to try to find a way to, if you're talking about a large pool GPP, to try to differentiate yourself, and he is expensive. So that's just what I'll say about Jamal Murray. But otherwise, yeah, he's pretty much a lock and load type player here. I really like Jeremy Grant for Denver. I think they're giving him more time compared to like Porter Jr. because of his defense. Again, Porter Jr. has been part of that Swiss cheese that I was talking about. He's not very good on defense. He's a great scorer, but Jeremy Grant's been pretty good on defense, and he's just been getting a lot of other stats, and he can score and get rebounds as well. So I like Jeremy Grant at 5,100 on both sites. He's a great value. And then Jokic has been, decent, but he's been kind of disappointing for the price that he gets in those high $9,000 pricing. He hasn't really been able to smash value. So maybe he finally, gets a little bit more assertive in Game 7, though. So he's talented enough to do it, but I just don't like how Jokic is kind of passive out there. He's not very aggressive. He seems to just want to sit out there and shoot longer jump shots and threes and stuff. And that's, he's okay at that, but that's not really what he's the best at. He needs to get down in the post and grind it out a little bit more and get assists out of the post and be a little bit more physical under there. I know it's a pretty tough matchup with Gobert, but I just feel like Jokic could actually step up and have a better game and be a little more assertive this game, especially since if they're smart, they're going to force Jamal Murray to give the ball up to their other star here. And Denver's I just want to point out they're a little bit better on defense now that they got Gary Harris back. Gary Harris would be kind of a deep sleeper. If you think he's going to play 25+ minutes, maybe he'll score a little bit and get defensive stats. Gary Harris is a great player, but I know he's just coming back, so it's hard to look at him. But I just want to point that out. That's going to help their defense against guys like Donovan Mitchell. And then, of course, on the Utah side, Donovan Mitchell's been playing great. If you look at FanDuel, his price hasn't jumped up quite as much as Murray. He's 8,500 on FanDuel compared to 9,900 on DK. Look at that discrepancy there. That's pretty big, right? So Mitchell's probably a little bit more play on FanDuel. And then you have Rudy Gobert. He's going to have to be in play because there's barely any centers on this slate that you can really trust anyway. So Gobert's 7,300 on FanDuel, 79 on DK. And Gobert's also been kind of like, at times he looks aggressive, at times he looks kind of passive, and he doesn't want to get down in the paint and really rebound and actually grind down there. So that's the thing that's disappointing about him. But he is talented, just like Jokic. He might actually get more aggressive and look to score a little bit more and actually get down there and crash the boards in a Game 7 with everything on the line. And, of course, he's got that high upside for blocks as well. He's a really good shot blocker. So I kind of like him. And then you got I still kind of like looking at Royce O'Neal because even though he's been slumping lately, he hasn't really done anything. He's not really taking shots. He plays a ton of minutes. He can score. He's an okay scorer, and he just does a lot of different stats. He gets assists and rebounds. So I still like him in that $4,600 to $4,500 range. I think he's still a good value at that power forward position. He's going to get his minutes, and I feel like he's due for a breakout game. I know we predicted his breakout games before, because right now is the time to play him, because if you look at his log right now, he's been really bad lately in terms of fantasy points, that is. And then, of course, Jordan Clarkson, he's $5,300 to $5,400 range, and he can heat up at any time. He's a little bit dependent on hitting those threes, but when he is hot, he's hot. He hasn't been the last few games here, hasn't been quite as hot, but he's another guy you can look at here. Those are probably the main guys. I mean, there's Joe Ingles. He's in consideration too. He's pretty cheap, $5,000 on FanDuel, so you really can't forget about him. Those are kind of the main guys I'm looking at in this game. And the problem is everything is so focused and concentrated on Jamal Murray and probably a little Donovan Mitchell here. So how do you differentiate here? And what is the game going to look like? Is there going to be a little bit of regression, like I feel like there is in a slow-paced half-court game, and these teams might decide to play defense in Game 7? That's my worry about this game. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure they're going to let it all out. And they're two. Utah is really known as a solid defensive team. Denver a little bit below average on the year, but they have had some major injuries, guys coming in and out of the lineup. I agree. They just, Coach and I have talked about it here on multiple shows. They've got to get the ball out of Mitchell's hands. They cannot let him do what he has done. And so if they do that, then, Conley and Clarkson are really attractive to me. I like that combo. It didn't end up working out in the last game because Mitchell scored so much down the stretch. It was just three-pointer after three-pointer in the last couple minutes. But if they can get it out of his hands, then, Conley and Clarkson for, much, much cheaper can score almost as much as him in terms of fantasy points. So that's where I'm going to lean, especially on DraftKings. Like you said, that is a major price discrepancy. That's very important. Mitchell, a lot tougher to fade on FanDuel. O'Neal, I agree. He's one of the few guys on this slate who's in the 4K price range, who's capable of 35 fantasy points or more. I mean, he had a 37.75 fantasy point game recently. He's not getting as many shots with Mitchell, Conley, and Clarkson on the floor. But like you said, he gets stats in so many ways. He's a pretty solid value play in terms of a floor. We know he's going to get the heavy minutes. So, he is in consideration for me. I haven't been playing Gobert, but he and Jokic, I mean, maybe those are the two guys here where if you play one of them, that is your path to a different lineup instead of playing Murray and Mitchell. Especially on DraftKings. I do not want to pay for both of them on DraftKings. And I think I'm just going to continue to use Murray and fade Mitchell on DraftKings and hope that Denver uses that defensive approach where they get it out of his hands. Because I absolutely prefer Murray over Mitchell out of those two. The other key thing is just thinking about Murray and Jokic together, because I really like playing them together because of that pick and roll that they run with each other. There's a high amount of correlation between the two. And Murray has, he's been scoring so much that it hasn't really worked out to pair Jokic with him. But could it possibly be here for the first time in recent games that Jokic actually outscores him fantasy point wise? If like you say, if they finally force him to pass more and he doesn't shoot the lights out, I could see Jokic outscoring him. And if Jokic steps up in Game 7 and is more aggressive, that's something to really think about. So we're going to continue to grind on that here until lock at 5:30 Eastern. And I also want to mention a value play on Denver. It's Torrey Craig. And, he's probably my favorite value play on this slate because he's only 3.6 on DraftKings. And last game, he took 3 shots, but he had 25 fantasy points. and he is so strong defensively that I really think Denver needs him to be out there. Like you said, Gary Harris is strong defensively, so he's going to get some run, but they can play together. Denver using a pretty short rotation as well. So Torrey Craig is really key play for me as a value play on DraftKings. He's a little bit more expensive over on FanDuel. And then Grant, like you said, he's getting the minutes, just not really scoring yet, or if he scores well, he's not rebounding. He hasn't put that big game together with the points, the rebounds, and the blocks like we know he can. But maybe this is the day where he finally puts it all together. That would be huge for us if we roll him out there again and he comes through.
Yeah, I think it's just you're looking at, they're going to run 2 or 3 guys at Jamal Murray. So I think like what you were talking about is this a game where Jokic is going to have to step up? In all those times where we're running the pick and roll, where Jamal Murray just goes up and just, goes for the layup or pulls up and just drains it every single time. That's what he's been doing. So, and Jokic is sitting over there like, hey, pass me the ball. I just rolled him open for a dunk. And he's just like, I'm not passing you. That seems like how it's been, right? If you're watching
three is better than 2.
Yeah, exactly. 3's better than 2, and I can't miss anything, mid-range, deep, anything. So, yeah, eventually, like I said, I think they're going to be running like 2 or 3 guys at Murray all day. So Jokic will get more open, and guys like Jeremy Grant will be open for three-pointers, that little side three-pointer. So he could get more run there as well. And like you said, the complementary players, I didn't mention Conley, but Conley's going to be really highly owned because he's in that nice like $6,600 to $6,800 price range. And obviously he has upside to do a little bit of everything too. So Conley will have to step up if they're trying to get Mitchell. I kind of like Mitchell, he's a little bit bigger and more physical in the paint to not just rely on his shooting, where Jamal Murray's been amazing in the paint, but he's been really relying on how hot he has been from 3 and that type of thing, where Mitchell can get down there and get to the free throw line and be a little bit more physical. So that's kind of what I like about Mitchell in this, and I'm predicting a grinded out, actually a tough game here. So yeah, I think so that's going to be the interesting dynamic. But yeah, you can look at those complementary players and focus on them and try to differentiate yourself, or you can just eat the chalk and go, Jamal Murray and Mitchell, but you're going to have the exact same lineup like on FanDuel as a lot of other people. So that's what's going to end up happening here. So that's what makes this interesting, the game within the game here, because there's going to be a lot of similar lineups on FanDuel because you don't have much position flexibility, and there's so much focus on this game and very specific players here. So I think that's the main thing I would say about this. And I do like the idea of Torrey Craig, and you kind of feel like he's still going to get minutes with Gary Harris. Even if Gary Harris gets a little bit more minutes, they're going to put both of them out there.
Yep.
So I do like that idea because it goes with the theme that they're going to focus on trying to play better defense now and try to stop these stars that have been putting up a lot of points, because that's really been the Achilles heel for both of these teams. It just, they're almost like they're alternating games, which they're going to play bad defense and let the other team just go completely nuts for scoring wise. So so that this is going to be, something has to give here. Something has to change is my point. We're not just going to see another, 50 real point Jamal Murray game. It's possible, but I don't think it's very likely is my point. Something is going to change here. And we need to try to predict what is going to change and how that's going to affect the DFS bills. That's the key here to differentiate. So.
That's right. Well, as we finalize that decision throughout the day on Tuesday, we do invite you again to jump in with us as members, and we'll give you that final set of lineups a half hour before lock. So jump in with us on Tuesday at dfscoachtalk.com. We'll get you in our Discord. If you're watching this on YouTube, please give us the thumbs up and subscribe. You'll get the notification when our podcast posts. Again, we do 7 NBA podcasts per week. We do 1 PGA podcast, and then we'll be doing several NFL podcasts per week as well. Social media, you can find Shane at DET Sports Shane on Twitter. He is the Detroit sports man. So DET Sports Shane. You can find me at Language Olympic. We'd love to have you interact with us on Twitter. And then you can find the group at DFS Coach Talk, and our fearless leader, Joe Sarvati, who is affectionately known as Coach. You can find him at JoeSarvadi. And then our man Freddie Mills, who's going to come through with another PGA article this week, is at Freddie Mills 7. So give him a follow. Terrific stuff there on Twitter. The charity of choice here at DFS Coach Talk is mambaon3.org, mambaontree.org. Shane, any final thoughts here as we get ready for the Tuesday slate?
I just say I'm excited to watch both of these games and see how it works out, because I think Boston and Toronto are great teams, and I think it's going to be very competitive for this game too. It's a really important game, and then to have our first Game 7 playoff game here is going to be very exciting. This has been a really exciting series between Denver and Utah. So now to have it come down to Game 7 with the way these teams are playing, it's going to be very exciting, and it's really hard to pick which tells you why Vegas basically has pretty much a pick 'em. I mean, 1 to 1.5 point favorites here for these games. So that's what makes it so fun to watch. And I expect really close competitive games here. And it's going to be great to watch for real life and for fantasy. So I'm excited for the slate. This is going to be awesome.
Absolutely. Totally echo that. And excited. Let's continue to roll here. We're on a good streak here with the bubble. So let's just keep on keeping on. And we're going to try to build winners for you guys. Hopefully you all enjoyed this podcast and got a good start on your builds. So like I said, we will be back tomorrow with another NBA show. On behalf of Sugar Shane Caldwell, the rest of the DFS Coach Talk team, I am Andrew Hansen. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to come back and join us again tomorrow as we look to crush it in NBA DFS.